I guess we'll do introductions first. Hi, I'm Ryan Chan. I'm on the user success team here at Zoas. So hopefully I'll be able to answer some questions that you guys have.
Yeah, I'm Philip, same team, user success, data engineer. And yeah, so I'm guessing your question is about the access right tokens, I'm assuming.
Yeah, this was actually my question.
Yeah, so reading into it,
Yeah.
or I guess you can explain the situation if you want, if anybody else wants to hear. I know Mark.
Yeah, because I'm introducing myself. I'm Ike. I'm one of the co-founders and software engineer of Emberoad. We are building an enterprise search engine with the latest NLP improvements, which is aimed to be multimodal as well. So we basically want to integrate text, image, video, and audio search as well. And for image search, we have been focusing on Milvus to make some embedding retrieval, embedding search. But we've been facing some problems with the filtering of queries. Basically, for each entity, we have a list of access tokens, and on query time, we need to put some kind of filter in order to retrieve only the entities where the user has access to. But as far as I know, Milvus doesn't support any array field, and some workarounds with normal fields, with string fields or with partitions have normally their limitations in terms of the total number of possible fields or possible partitions or collections.
Mm-hmm.
Is the problem clear?
Huh?
Is the problem clear?
Yeah, I think I understand it. And in regards to that, so yeah, we are pretty limited on fields right now. I think it's like we do have a focus to kind of increase that and probably add more types of fields. So as you said, array, and right now we only support int, but working towards string. But as a current workaround, I'm guessing you've probably already thought of this. Is there any way you can kind of do like trying to think of combining all of them in, let's say you have an int, like a large int, and then you can this probably won't work, never mind. But for now, I would, how many access rights are there? Do you know?
Lots of them. Some more than 60,000, let's say. If we think of large enterprises, this might be a problem of scalability. So we need somehow a solution which doesn't limit us in terms of total numbers of access sites, let's say.
And then will that be changing over time, adding more and more? Do you think?
Yeah, probably, but that's not a requirement for now.
Okay.
You can assume that the total number of access sites is known from the beginning.
All right, this is a bit of a tricky problem. And I think I'm looking at the message you posted in Slack, and I think you already understand, why it's a difficult problem. You might be able to hack something together with just using like a single integer to denote this, and then doing some hacky thing with not really using it, but using that as like a data representation for each of the different access tokens. But even that, like, I'm just thinking about that would probably not scale well, and I would not want to use that in production. But yeah, out of the box, I don't believe we really support this, unfortunately. Philip, you got any ideas?
The only way you already mentioned is doing multiple collections, and that would require some logical endurance. So maybe like you can group or partition different types of access rights. So if you want to look for if there's, I'm not sure what the tokens kind of represent, but if you can somehow group them up, then you do a partition strategy. But that would kind of put more work on your end of figuring out the logic there. but I believe we're going to try to increase the amount of fields that we support. But the thing I worry in regards to that might be a little bit of time, because currently how we're working on Milvus is we're just trying to get the stability down for now. So like our goal is pretty much every release candidate is to up the stability by 2 or like ×2. So double how much we can store, how long it can stay up, and pretty much, yeah, how much like a peak usage it can handle. So in regards to that, I don't think we have an answer right now for you. But as with this, so the idea for this is, because you guys are actually here and asking the questions, I think we can kind of really try to get the questions to the engineering team as fast as possible. So by the end of the day, I'll have an answer for you. And I can see if they have any ideas or what their maybe timeline / idea of how many fields they are going to support in the future and what they're thinking about. Because I think your use case is going to be a pretty popular one. People are going to want to support a lot of fields. So yeah, I'll definitely, I think Eric's writing down the question. We also have the recording, but expect probably your morning or end of day, we're going to have some answers.
Yeah, okay. This will be good. Thanks.
See a few other people joined as well. Also, if you have any more questions, I know this is your main one on the Slack channel.
Everyone,
Haley.
my name is Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah, recognize some of you guys from Slack and YouTube and stuff like that. So appreciate you guys opening this up.
Sure.
I'm at NVIDIA and I'm working with a large retail customer. All right, I'm sure you've probably shopped there at some point. I can't necessarily name their name, but the idea is to do hybrid search, right, across many different types of applications. Ultimately, the POC is kind of starting off with like just 200,000 embeddings, their products. Some of the things to keep in mind. Hybrid, it's more like a hybrid solar deployment. So I came from a company called LucidWorks, right, which is kind of the founding company of solar. So they've integrated Milvus into the product. So super big fans. And I know you guys have capabilities of storing text within, I believe, the MySQL portion of the stack. But I think in this case, for this customer, they tend to use Redis on the front end and the cache and things like that. So I guess first question would be, in Milvus 2.0, would you have that capability to swap out MySQL with Redis or something like that, that either holds text differently or even using Solar? Any thoughts there?
Not for now, but let me write that actually down. So for 2.0, they want to use Redis for metadata storage.
Well, they tend to use that to cache a lot of things. So the idea of, let's say, having a MySQL database now to maintain as well is not, I don't want to say it's super attractive, or no, it's not very attractive, but we're just trying to think of different solutions for them as well, right? And if they already have Solar that's a really good text retrieval system, they may just want to get the Docker IDs from Milvus, if that makes sense.
And this is for 2.0.
We're testing on 1 point. I forget the version we're testing on, because I guess 2.0 is not. When is that officially coming out?
So it's moved back to the end of September right now.
Okay.
For when we're assuming like billion scale stable. There might be some date changes, but assume around end of September, and then worst case somewhere in October.
Understood. Yeah, and I guess a little more about the use case, right? On the NVIDIA side, we're deploying models with Triton. So the idea is to actually integrate Triton into Milvus such that you try to keep everything on the GPU. So one thing we haven't figured out yet on the Milvus side is, so Triton has a lot of dynamic batching capabilities, pretty much very similar to what Milvus has. Naturally, we would sort of gravitate towards the Triton version of handling all the batching and whatnot. So imagine you have a model deployed, And as part of that model deployment, you have a reach out to Milvus, right? So one of the things that sort of began my whole discussion with the team was you can send in very large batches into the GPU, right? Several thousand examples or quite large depending on the size of your model. So then we wanted to essentially bulk query Milvus, get all of those lists of doc IDs, and then the way that Triton works, it'll take each individual request that came in, even though it came in a batch, and sort of reserve them out to the corresponding requesters, right? So one of the bottlenecks that we anticipated, we haven't necessarily proved it too hard yet, is that Milvus returns and you have to iterate through your request object.
Yeah, I saw that you mentioned that where you had to unpack it.
Yeah.
I think we created an issue for that. I'm not 100% sure what the current status of that is, but that was one I remember there was discussion. Let me see if I can pull that up.
Yeah, I didn't file it just because I wanted to make sure on our side, we had thought through the problem properly. But that is something that sort of came up. And then another thing was, if I'm on the GPU and I send a request to Milvus and Milvus is in GPU mode, is that request processed on the CPU and then you're sending, are you copying back to the CPU and then sending to the GPU? Or do you think, or you
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
For queries, if you're trying to, instead of avoiding it, I believe it all goes through and then it also comes out because the ranking is done on CPU, I believe, as well. So it needs to come out of the GPU when you're returning it. And for coming into the GPU, I think it does have to go through the CPU.
I see. So you're ranking.
I think the ranking is done on CPU. But it shouldn't be that, like, these are very small, like odd. I'm not sure how much of a slowdown you're going to be getting.
Yeah.
In terms of that.
Well, we have a 25 millisecond, at least for that particular, it's bird based, just so you guys know. Right. So if you wanted to maybe do some benchmarks on that, I think that would be cool. But let me just think for a second. Okay.
So when you say 25 or for 25 milliseconds, is that the whole pipeline of
that
searching?
Is pretty much a response from bird, including answers, right? So imagine you wrap that in Triton and Milvus. You send in a batch of requests and they come back out. It can get close to 25 if the throughput is a little higher, which is okay. And that's the kind of paradigm that you'll end up seeing on the GPUs, super high throughput, a little larger latency, but smaller amount of hardware overall,
Do you know how much BERT is currently taking up of that time?
I don't know the exact, hold on, let me probably pull up some numbers. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know the BERT to Milvus yet, that actual query into Milvus, but once I have that, I can definitely get that back to you guys. And I guess just any general best practices around, okay, I have this large solar deployment. I'm starting out in neural search, and naturally people, they take smaller steps. They're not just gonna completely flip the architecture. So, what would you say are the best practices for working in a hybrid environment, right? Where you typically do a lot of search in solar, you want to do a POC on Milvus, and with the idea of rolling it out, if it really works well, project by project across the enterprise. So that's kind of what I wanted to try to understand from you guys.
So when you say best practice in regards to like what specific area, like I'm sort of kind of new to this.
Okay,
so,
sure.
Yeah.
So definitely indexing, right? So a big part of e-commerce search, one of the questions was, do I need to replicate my index as to update, or can I update in place, right?
So
this is both 1 and 2.
So yeah, for indexing wise, if you're not changing any of the index, you don't have to replicate, you don't have to do anything, it'll automatically index for you. Changing indexes, you should do it pretty much with 1.0, you kind of have to do it in place. You're gonna have to be replacing and re-indexing everything. If you're updating values, you're set in regards to like if you just update values that are already indexed, it'll re-index those specific segments. So you won't have to re-index everything. But with Milvus 2.0, like, because a lot of people want to be able to index on multiple fields, have multiple indexes at once. That's what we're kind of moving towards. We don't have multiple indexes for one field ready yet. It shouldn't be too much work, but that's what we're kind of going to go there. So there you can have one index that you're searching with while you're building up another index in the same collection. You can have every type of different index. You can have multiple different parameter styled indexes, and you can kind of select which one you want to use in one. That's in 2.0. That one will, I think, that will be in there by the release. But currently, for if you're doing 1.0, if you're focusing on that in regards to indexing, you're kind of stuck to one per collection. So if you are going to be updating a lot of values or re-indexing, you can kind of do like an A/B style and try to keep one collection for completely new data, or like if you changed up your neural net and you have new type of embeddings, kind of roll through and do that A/B style of switching tables and indexing while the other one's searching. Oh, I don't know if that helped at all.
Yeah, so yeah, I think just so I can summarize there, best practice in production, at least for now, would be to essentially, you have a dual index, right? So I'm updating one, he's offline, I swap over once he's updated, get this guy updated, right?
That's the best way if you want to keep your searches fast. Because if you re-index the same one and you still need searches, you're just going to be doing a brute force, and that will slow down dramatically.
I see. Okay. Do you guys have any maybe use cases of GPUs on the largest amount of embeddings that you've kind of held on GPUs?
In terms of use cases, I'm not sure if there have been many, but I think we can benchmark. I'm not sure if we have the benchmark values for like immediately right now. I'm not sure if I can find it. But you're saying like in terms of dimension, like when the dimensions are in the 36,000 range or something like that, or?
Well, both dimension and number of
Okay.
vectors as well, right? Just as the total size of the index. So as we try to work with this customer, let's say they're gonna have 4 million products. In some other use cases, they'll definitely have more, and trying to scale out into the total number of GPUs that they'll need for both, current production and failover.
Yeah.
Like
so in terms of that, yeah, for if you want the full-blown speed, you have to be able to store everything in GPU, all the index files. Otherwise, you're going to default to using caching style and swapping from memory, which will slow down a bit. Not sure 100% how much of a slowdown is. I can double check if we have values for that. But then we also have like the different type. There's the index, the SQ8H, where it's hybrid based. So you're searching on CPU and GPU, which does improve. I'm not sure how much it improves upon if you're going fully just one. But then in regards to that as well, there's also, we have like for Milvus 1.0 or like the version 1 architecture, is we have the threshold value, which depending on how large the actual search is, it's sometimes faster to just keep it on CPU. So like how many values you're searching for instead of throwing them onto GPU. And that's another one to mess around with, because I believe what they were doing is in regards to that one was the actual transfer of all the vectors. If you're only searching for one, you don't really get the parallel performance of the GPU, even though everything's already there in memory. So to be safe, if you're going to be if you want all GPU, you're going to have to be able to store all of the index in the GPU if you want the full speed up. And preferably you are going to want to batch your searches before using it to actually be able to use the GPU speed up.
So pretty much get as large of a batch as possible coming in to just overcome.
Yeah.
CPU.
Exactly.
You mentioned something around the ranking occurring on the CPU, even if you're on GPU. Is that, I think understand it correctly?
I think it does still like collect. So if you have multiple GPUs, it still does collect on the CPU to give the output. I need to double check. I asked one of our main engineers, but he was joined after 2.0 was getting into development, so he didn't have too much info. But that's one I will double check. But I believe that we do the ranking and the kind of the condensation of all the results on the CPU.
Cool. And yeah, I think we're looking at Milvus internally as well for a recommendation platform to store all the embedding tables on the GPU, which will be pretty cool. Okay. Yeah, let me look and see what other questions. I'll let some other folks go. Thanks.
A quick note for your GPU based, how you want to keep it in GPU. So what if you get the let's say you get the results and you want to keep that in GPU? With 1.0, pretty much your result is going to be the key, the unique key or whatever. How will that help you in terms of speed up if you keep it all in GPU?
Because just from a data transfer perspective, right? Because at least in Triton, all of the different processes, they don't ever talk. So a lot of NVIDIA's new software platforms, they don't even talk to the CPU essentially, right? Everything is done on the GPU, and that's how the libraries are written now. So imagine I had an ensemble model. So I do a bunch of things, and then I go off and search for Milvus. If that's hitting the CPU, but my entire search index is on the GPU, then I'm pretty much going around just to talk to my neighbor who's right there, right? So that's why if we can talk directly to that particular shared memory on the GPU that Milvus is occupying, things should be anticipate a lot faster because that's how we've just seen it with a lot of other.
That makes sense. Yeah, I can get a response, a little bit of a deeper response, and see if that's something we can try to do at 2.0. I'm not sure with all the different services running with 2.0 how that would be.
And I think that's something you guys should probably definitely consider partnering with NVIDIA, right? Just because if you are running on GPUs and you're doing multi-GPU indexes, there are the new NV links and things like that link different GPUs together. So the interconnects are super fast. The memory is a lot faster than RAM typically. So you might get some good speed ups there.
Awesome.
Hi, Mark. Just one question. So what is the typical hardware configuration you're proposing to your users with your GPU? Is that with the NVIDIA DGX type of GPU server?
Right now, I believe we might be doing some testing on some T4s or V100s. That's what the customer has in their particular lab. But internally at NVIDIA, it'll most likely be DGX and the A100 GPUs. That the 80 gig GPUs probably, or the 40 gig ones. Does that answer your question, John?
Okay, I got it. Yeah. So at this moment, we don't aware. I mean, any user are using a pure GPU type of high-end HPC server. So a lot of users are using running Milvus in the cloud environment. Either it's Kubernetes cloud, private cloud, or it's a public cloud. So most of them are utilizing the CPU to run Milvus. So when they have those kind of GPU resources, they're using in index building type of workload. So that's the current status of our community users. So yeah, we were happy to see if there are more users using the DGX type of high-end GPU servers. But yeah, we didn't see many people are using that at this moment.
I see. So a fair amount of our customers, at least when they're in the cloud, depending on their workloads, they will be using some of the A100s. I'm not necessarily sure if they're in this specific like DGX configuration versus Microsoft and Google and those guys buying A100s and installing them in their own servers. You know what I mean?
Okay, I see. Yeah, especially, I mean, I think NVIDIA start to provide those multi-tenant capability starting from A100, right? So yeah, we haven't experienced this functionality of the I think that's Ampere architecture GPU.
Ampere, yeah.
Yeah, so our users at this moment, they're more free, like maybe P100 or T4 type of GPU resources.
Yep. T4 is typically, at least in the Turing architecture, is kind of the best for inference. And then I don't know how many of our customers are doing multiple models on the same card. So that's the other use case that we're also investigating, right? So I have, I have my entire index on GPU, but I also have, I might have different GPUs, let's say, that have particular models on them, but you have multiples of those models. So I'm having multiple sets of batch requests coming into Milvus. If that makes sense.
Oh,
You see what I'm saying?
yeah. I'm thinking about that because, yeah, we do have some users. They have large volume of incoming traffic. I mean, they need to ingest high volume of vectors into the Milvus vector database. So that time, what they did is they have, for example, if they have multiple GPU devices installed on one server, they have one dedicated GPU device for Milvus running, because Milvus also need to take a certain amount of memory. If it's GPU, then it's a GPU memory. And if you're running the model, and you also need allocate quite a lot of memory for the model. So previously, what I saw is they will have one dedicated GPU devices for Milvus and one dedicated GPU devices for the model inference. So that's not on the same GPU device, because just trying to prevent the contention on the GPU memory.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, so that sounds good. I mean, I'm gonna dig some more questions and I'll get back to you guys in a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I don't know. Who wants to go next? Any questions?
Yeah, Philip, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Shubham. I'm from India. Actually, so I just started learning Milvus like 2-3 days back. I joined a new organization where they are using Milvus right now. So what they need is like they have a list of documents, and each document has a location associated with it. And suppose the document belongs to all the documents belongs to the complete US, all 50 US states, and what I need is we can associate the location to each document and filter when I'm trying to search the document with respect to the vectors to that document. I need the document with respect to the given miles and given location. So for example, if I'm looking for any document in New York City within 100 miles, then that kind of search I should be able to get through Milvus. So previously I used to do this under query through Elasticsearch, where they have geolocation search. So I asked the similar question on this Milvus group. There, Sida Shan told me that Milvus 2 supports scalar filtering, where we can perform query before similarity search. But when I was checking the documentation of Milvus 2, the search, there were like multiple first of all indexes, and also I'm kind of not able to really understand like how I can directly pass. So I have list of two different values for latitude and longitude, and also associated to that I have a vector of for the document. So I was I'm not really sure whether it's a right platform to ask this question. So just let me know if you have any thought about it, like, or maybe you can help with this problem for me.
Yeah, so I'm assuming, so like you could pretty much do the same query, I believe, that you were doing in Elasticsearch. In regards to the scalar field, so for now we support ints. And let's say, I'm not sure what type of, if you're doing geolocation, so longitude and latitude positions could be one, where you can transform those. I believe you can get an int format for that. And then search, so when you're doing a search or a query, you can limit what, like, let's say you want the longitude between X and Y and the latitude between X and Y. So that could kind of give you it wouldn't be an exact like circular range. I think it would be more of a square range around the location that you're trying to search for.
So there are like multiple logical operators in the Milvus too. So there we have like less than or greater than. So if we pass any parameter like latitude should be less than or greater than some value, then will it really work if I search like that?
It should work, yeah. As long as you're, for now it's ints, and I think longitude and latitude can be ints. I think, yeah, but I think that should work perfectly. I can try a little test as well later today. Just quick, like,
I was
not really
also
good.
checking the DSL queries for Milvus, where we have range queries, and we can pass those similar value in the must have or should in the Milvus. So I checked that in the Milvus website, where it has like multiple set of DSL queries. So I was trying with that today, but with that query, it took more than half an hour, but it didn't yield any result when I loaded the whole collection. So maybe I might be going somewhere wrong, so I'm not really sure.
So we are running into some bugs currently. How large of a collection were you dealing with there?
It was just a sample collection where I had just 1,000 documents, and each document was having dimension of 128 size for vectors.
I'll need to double check with that. I'm not sure how far we've gotten in regards to our query like testing. It should work in regards. I don't think you're, but I'm guessing there's probably a bug that's hitting because there is some loading bugs right now as well. But let me double check. So you said, let me write a little note down.
I posted about it on the Milvus users hash Milvus users channel today in the evening, according to Indian time. Yeah.
I'll double check that today. I'll run the same situation.
Go take a look at that right now.
But yeah, it should work. I'm assuming that you're probably hitting a bug, but I'll double check. I'll recreate what you did and see kind of what happens, and I'll get back to you on that. So I'm probably going to try to post answers later today for all these questions in the Slack. I'm not sure if I can tag people in the actual post, but yeah, so the plan is for all these questions I can't really answer right now, I'll have it done by the end of today.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And just last question. So does like Milvus 2 has a very good stability in the production? Like how many use cases we already know, like the companies are using Milvus 2 right now?
Milvus 2 right now is not stable for production, I would say.
It's currently in release candidate stage, and we would generally not recommend it for production at the moment.
Yeah.
We have a target release date of around the end of September for a production ready product.
Oh, okay. So then I think in the older versions we don't even support the scalar filtering, I guess, right?
Older versions don't support. You can do something with tagging and partitioning to kind of do a filter, but then you're only limited to one int, and that might be hard. Like there probably could be a way of doing it, but I don't think it would be too easy for geolocation filtering.
Yeah,
we need to add the post processing.
Yeah, if you're talking about the Geo Index type of geolocation filtering, then that is something beyond the capability of Milvus actually, because the geolocation, the Geo Index is a totally a different set of algorithm need to be implemented into the system. So as you mentioned, if, for example, you're using Elasticsearch, and Elasticsearch, they are covering certain type of scenarios to provide, for example, in the cybersecurity type of scenario, they'll provide those kind of functionality. But yeah, I just want to mention the Geo Index type of thing is something still beyond the scope of Milvus at this moment.
Okay.
Quick question for June in regard to that geoindex. So geoindexing is for speeding up a search based on, like you're indexing based on the location. But if you're just trying to search and filter out things that are, let's say, 100 miles away, that should be able to be done through Scalar. It will be slow, but
yeah, yeah, that will be so the geo index type of thing is, for example, 100 miles away, but 100 miles is a you have to draw a circle around the point, for example, the New York City. So if we don't create the geo type of index, that will be pretty slow. You have to just like we do the brute force search in Milvus without any index. So it depends on the amount of the value, the actual information in the system. So if we do this type of things without index, it will be pretty slow. I mean, previously we had another open source project which is dealing with all these kind of geo type of computation and analytics. So that's a different set of algorithm needs to implement it into the system to do this kind of like the geo filtering, scale in, scale zoom in, zoom out type of analytics. So that is something different.
Okay. Yeah. Fine then. Yeah. Thanks, Philip. Yeah. Thanks, June. Yeah.
Hey guys.
Hey.
I have a question here, Philip. We met to previous conversations. So yeah, I had questions mainly around like the performance comparison of Milvus 2.0 with 1. I was looking up and reading some of the GitHub issues. Right now, it looks like 2.0 is not as performant as 1.1. So is there any like timeline or like any guidance around that?
Yeah, I can answer this one. Yeah. So basically, yeah, you're absolutely correct in your assessment that Milvus 2.0 is generally not as fast in pretty much most cases as Milvus 1.1. And in terms of timelines, by the time that Milvus 2.0 actually comes into full release, we expect that it will have performance either equivalent or superior to 1.1. Kind of the release candidate version that's out right now is not so much for production workloads. It's just so that people can get started developing their applications on it. So in terms of benchmarks, we don't really have any hard benchmarks for the current release candidate at the moment, since it's kind of changing so often. But if you're asking in terms of like what might be better for your production workload in the long term, I will say that eventually Milvus 2.0 will definitely work out better at higher data scales once it actually comes out, just due to the improved scaling features of 2.0. It has much better distributed support versus 1.1. But at the moment, for most cases, 1.1 is just going to be faster, just due to the development progress.
I see. So yeah, and would you like put out any benchmarks for large collections? Because that's also kind of important while evaluating 2.0. I know, like, I've been looking at. Sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, for large scale 2.0, that's something that I was working on. The main issue right now is our stability really falls after you go past 50 million.
Okay.
So I was trying to do 100 million, just as a little like baseline of kind of see how it works, how it like works with how many nodes, different size machines for each node, but it's not stable enough. After 100 million, or like getting to 100 million, loading the collection sometimes fails, or not sometimes, majority of the time fails.
Right.
So that's where I said, like, so our current plan for how we're testing the release candidates right now is we're kind of going, I think for the next release, we're trying to be stable at 50 million. And the next one is 100 million, then 500 million, then 1 billion. And once we get those stabilities, we're going to be doing some big tests and benchmarks on large scale. It's really exciting to try that out, but unfortunately, I gave it as best of a shot, but it was a little bit too unstable at those larger scales. But do expect large scale tests.
Got it. Yeah, we're interested in around like 500 million, the billion scale.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then the plan for that testing as well is going to be like doing Kubernetes versus doing manual deployments, doing different size machines, or if you do a lot of small machines versus a few big machines, how many nodes for each case, how many like concurrent inserts, searches from different machines. But we do have some plans for those bigger tests and try to be kind of encompass everything and also the different cloud providers.
That'll be great. And as part of the performance, would 2.0 have some sort of caching built into it? I mean, right now, like in 1.0, if you want to support like really high throughput and like near real-time indexing, we do add some caching on our end to support high throughput. So I was just wondering, like, would that be any feature that you'd be able to provide?
So when you say caching in regards, is that like caching similar searches? Or
right. I mean, I'm not talking about like at the Milvus layer, like maybe one layer above, like beyond Milvus. And Milvus does provide some caching when we load up the entire index into the memory. But I'm just wondering, like outside of Milvus.
Outside of Milvus, I'm not 100% sure if we will be doing caching.
Okay.
But in terms of 2.0 as well, one thing that I noticed, I'm not sure if we're changing, is that in order to be able to do a search, you're going to have to be able to store all your entire index into memory. So there won't be any more caching of like swapping between memory and disk or that kind of stuff that Milvus 1.0 was doing. That for 2.0, you're going to have the data nodes have to be able to split up and fit everything within memory.
Yeah, I think the I think the cache you're talking about is something like in a traditional scenario, you have a Redis to cache the result of the query. I think the challenge in Milvus, I mean, vector search type of workload is you can cache the your query vector and you can cache the result, but maybe next time you're using different vector to search, especially if you're in an image search type of scenario, the query vector could be different. Even you think your query the same thing, but if it's a recommended system, then I think it will be pretty safe. You cache these query vector and the result in Redis, because for certain type of user, there always be the same vector. But in image search type of scenario, that could be different.
Got it.
Yeah, and this query query level cache, that's out of Milvus. Even in 2.0, that will be out of Milvus. And I just wanted to add something regarding the testing. So we are now on Milvus 2.0 RC4. So and we're about to release RC5 to fix some obvious, I mean, bugs in 2.0. And starting from RC6, we will start to include the testing results upon certain level of data sets. Maybe it's still not like 500 million type of data sets, but it will be like we always do with the AN benchmark test weights. For example, 1 million at least we will have, and probably 10 million.
Got it. That'd be helpful. Just one more question before I stop. I've been using Milvus 1.0 a lot, and I've seen like certain, like I should say, certain features that are not available in Milvus 1.0 but will be available in Milvus 2. Like, will you be able to support non-numeric IDs for entities in Milvus 2.0?
Yeah, like string ID type of things.
Yes.
It's in the long-term plan. It's on the feature list. Yeah, but at this moment, it's the priority is not that high.
Got it.
Yeah,
and it doesn't, like Milvus 1.0 doesn't provide ability to search based on IDs. So we've been doing a workaround where we call the get entity by ID and retrieve the vectors, and then use that vector to query and get results back. So I was just wondering if that's some feature that will be provided in 2.0, wherein you can just query by IDs if the vectors already exist in the database.
So that's also on our roadmap for 2.1, search by ID, and then the vector similarity search by distance. But it is on the roadmap, but I'm not sure. I don't think there's progress on that yet. So I think it'll have to be, for now, the workaround that you've done of get entity and then search. But it is on the roadmap.
Yeah. Okay, and lastly, the uniqueness check. I did post an issue on GitHub about this. I just wanted to get a quick update on that. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide uniqueness check to the database, wherein like if you're trying to insert a vector along with an ID that already exists, you don't do that, or like you give a message saying that it already exists. Right now, again, we're doing a workaround where we first query to see if a vector is there in the database, and only if not, then insert the vector. I mean, it's very like, it's not optimal, the solution. It's not like for high throughput, it's not performant at all, especially when the limitations of the get entity by ID, where like even for the uniqueness check, where it's going to retrieve the entire vector and a lot of network overhead. So yeah, that's another thing that we're wondering, like if it's on the roadmap, and when will that be available?
I could see about that, because I think that would be a pretty quick one to implement. It was just, you'd still have to do the, I think, brute force sort of search, but we could avoid that overhead you talk about of actually dealing with the vectors and going into that whole ordeal. But let me actually write a note on that one. I think that could be one that would be.
Yeah, so the uniqueness you're talking about, is that the uniqueness of the vector ID, or it's the vector itself?
Vector ID. Yeah, the vector ID, not the vector.
Okay, I see.
And have customers been using Milvus as a vector store, or like a feature store, if you may call it, wherein, yes, I mean, one thing I've seen, like it works well for the getting the similar results back. But I was wondering if customers are using Milvus to just as a feature store, like, you know, wherein like I want embedding or vectors for this particular ID and I get that back. Again, I know like the get entity by ID method is available in 1.0, but it's not very performant, and there's a limitation of, you know, you can query only 1,000 items at a time. So yeah, I was just wondering like if that's something people are using Milvus for.
Yeah, we do see people using Milvus as a vector store, about to store the vector and retrieve the vector. But yeah, in most cases, there's still people rely on Milvus to do the search type of analytics.
Okay. Thank you. These answers my questions. Thank you so much.
Let's see. I'm not sure if anybody else has some more, but for Igli and Mark, I wrote down your questions, and for you, Vishal. And I think we have a recording, so I'll go back through and just get all those questions and then send them out to the answers to the Slack group.
Yeah, I just have one quick one. I think I did ask it in the channel, but while I have you guys here, when it comes to you know, inserting vectors with the same ID that you use, let's say in Solar or your actual product ID, you don't necessarily have control of that in Milvus 1.0. Is that correct?
Yeah, or 1.0, I think you can do your own IDs.
You can assign ideas in 1.0.
But they are limited to ints. They currently are in 2.0 as well. But yeah, they're limited to ints, and then you have to deal with uniqueness. So if you do have overlap, let's say you double insert by accident, your closest result will be two of the same things.
Okay, so chances are you'll end up having a mapping, unless your actual value was an int anyway, and then it works out, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
I mean, one drawback with that, having multiple results in the same vectors in the results, is like we're leaving it up to the clients to do the pagination, and it gets very messy once it's done outside of the database. So that's one thing that's the reason why we're looking for a uniqueness check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll get back. If it's just the ID, I think that could be a pretty simple one. I'm not sure how fast it will be. I'm not sure if there's any I'm not sure how everything's stored internally currently for 2.0 in regards to that, but I think it shouldn't be too bad of one to double check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
and
sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so generally for the solution of uniqueness, and there's the kind of the quote unquote obvious solution of doing the get by ID and checking that, but you mentioned it's not super performant. So really the best way that we found to handle this thing is just handle it on the insert side, and try to basically create a mapping of the IDs and such, and handle this before actually inserting into Milvus. If you just want performance, that's probably going to be your best way, because we currently don't really have a good performant way of checking for uniqueness other than that get entity by ID.
So you're suggesting that we store IDs in the metadata store beforehand, before inserting? Is that what you're suggesting?
That would be one way to handle it that you could do, yeah.
But in regards also to your question for uniqueness check, will you do a batch uniqueness check? So if you're going to try to insert 100, you'll have 100 IDs and then check that through and then see for that which ones are hitting copies.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So this has been this has come to light mainly when we're doing massive backfills of our existing collections, and even for live traffic, we do inserts in batches.
Mm-hmm.
Say even if it's a small batch of 64, that'll be super helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I'll double check that one and see if there's. So I think that would also be useful for a lot of other people just to avoid the same. Awesome. And then I'm not sure if anybody else has any more questions.
Yeah, there were a few in the chat window, but I think Ryan was able to cover those. We'll take a note on those as well, just to make sure we follow up on them.
So yeah, I'll double see. So the C++ backend, I think we're going to be keeping it in Go. I think they really wanted to use Go for this one. So I think that's going to be staying in Go. And then scan, it's in the roadmap. I'm not 100% sure. I'll post the road. I don't know if I posted it yet.
Yeah, it's planned for 2.1.
Yeah,
which is
we are looking into scan because a lot of people have been liking that one. It's been showing really good results. Pulsar. So right now we're having a few bugs with Pulsar, and I think we're posting on Pulsar's GitHub page. We might be moving to Kafka, I think, or we will want to at least support both. But I'm not 100% sure for the reasoning why we chose Pulsar. But yeah, that's the current situation on that one.
Yeah, hopefully it's not the same bugs that the other switch team I used to work for. They ran into a couple of things and they pretty much ripped it out of the platform. So just keep that in mind with folks who may have integrated Pulsar into the environment and seeing Milvus 2 having Pulsar. At least they were kind of hesitant to be like, Milvus 2, they weren't as excited, basically. So.
I see. Just out of curiosity, do you know what they switched to from their old Pulsar system?
I can find out. I'll let you guys know.
That'd be awesome.
Okay, yeah, I'd be curious to know.
Let's see if there is some more. Yeah. So any more questions? Hopefully our answers have been sort of useful, but again, I'll try to get all those kind of grouped up, write them out, and then post them.
Thank you guys for having this. This is good. I think you should have more often.
No, definitely. I think we're gonna try to do it every 2 weeks.
Oh wow. Okay.
I think. So yeah.
Sweet. Well, appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome.
We have a few announcements in the works too. So at one of these calls, I think you guys will you'll be pretty jazzed. And I know that I had mentioned to you guys about getting a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, and I'm wearing the sweatshirt. You probably can't see the logo, but shoot me a message maybe in Slack if you guys are interested in either one of those. I'll send you the sizing chart and I'll send it out to you.
All right. Appreciate it.
Right on.
Thank you. All right.
Thank
See
you.
you guys.
Yeah,
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Have a nice day.
yeah, you too. Bye.
Thank you guys. Have a good one.
Good night,
Yeah,
Jim. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming.